24 is over and has been for a while, but we are just getting started as we recap every season of 24 once a week, all the way till 24 Live Another Day kicks off. I am Rob Cesternino, and here is my co-host over in CTU. It's Josh Wigler.
Am I the Chloe to your Jack? Can I humbly request to be the Tony to your Jack, please?
Damn it, Josh, we're running out of time.
I've been trying really hard to grow a soul patch, and there's not much more I can do beyond what we're seeing here, so
Yeah.
it's no good.
Well, we should at the very least get Cubs coffee mugs, I think.
I might be one step ahead of you on that. That might be in the mail.
There you go.
That might be in the mail.
So this is post-show recaps. If you're joining us here for the first time, we just kicked off in February. We are covering TV shows and movies, and what we'd like to do is we get on here live right after the end of the episode, and we talk about what just happened. And Josh and I are very excited about 24 Live Another Day kicking off in May. So this was Josh's brainchild. I have to give him all the credit. He had this idea of, hey, I'm going to go back and watch every single episode and every season of 24. And then once a week, let's talk about the seasons and do a recap, getting us all the way to 24 Live Another Day, and here we are.
Yeah, I gotta say the podcast hasn't even started, and I kind of regret it. But it's a good kind of regret. This is good feeling bad about myself.
All right, so today's show, we are going to cover 24 Season 1. We are live on post-show recaps. We have the chat room going. I'm able to also take your questions on our YouTube channel at postshowrecaps.com/YouTube. And, of course, you can use the hashtag PSRecaps to get in your questions here as we are live. And, of course, most of this is probably going to be people listening to this in the archives as they start to get ready for 24 Live Another Day. And there's not a lot of other 24 podcasts out there, so I feel like we're really carving out a niche for ourselves.
Yeah, I think so. We're ahead of the curve on this one, I think. But it's exciting. I feel like this is worth doing. There's 24. There's a lot of episodes that you can burn through. I think that when the show does come back in May, it's going to be a real hot topic of conversation. You could probably just hop in with that season, but there's a lot of fun stuff in the archives to go back and take a look at. A lot of it really holds up pretty well. A lot of it is very dated. Kim Bauer still sucks in every season, but there's a lot of fun to mine through. So I think this is going to be a good time if you're somebody who is interested in watching 24 all over again, or if you've watched 24 and you need a refresher, or if you just want the spoilers from the old season. I think we can take care of you on all of those fronts.
Okay. Well, this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited to talk about Season 1 of 24, and this is what really sort of kicked off the phenomenon here. So let's just sort of paint some broad strokes about what is so important about 24 Season 1.
Yeah, 24 Season 1, speaking personally, this was really the show that really got me into, really hooked me into watching these 1 hour crazy dramas. Like, I'm a big Lost fan. I think most people who know me know that. And before I was a Lost fan, I was a big 24 fan. And I'm not a day one viewer. I watched all of Season 1, but I don't believe that I started watching until the 8th episode or so. And it's the episode where Jack is he's a fugitive from justice for the first time, which happens a lot throughout this show. And he's holding down on a construction site with a waitress, and he's been framed for trying to assassinate the president. And there's just all sorts of cool stuff, and it really grabbed me right away, and it never let go, even when it was really bad. And sometimes this show can be pretty bad. It was always really fun, and it really produced a very iconic character, I think, in Jack Bauer. Say what you will about the show and its quality over the years, but Jack Bauer is a pop culture icon at this point, and it all starts in Season 1, which is a very, very different season from the rest of 24. So I think it's kind of worth going back and sort of examining why that's the case.
Yeah, and it's an important show, I think, also for a couple of reasons. Now, I didn't come in until a couple years down the road, but Alan Sepinwall does a really good job of capturing in his book, The Revolution Was Televised, about some of the things that are really important about 24. And one of the other things about it is that it's a serialized drama, which basically each season is sort of a self-contained story, where if you were to watch them out of order or anything like that, it's like a show that has almost like no repeat value. But you would see other network shows come along and sort of try to copy this, such as like a show like Lost, where if you watched it out of order, it wouldn't make sense. and 24 I think was very important in establishing that.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And it's also ambitious as hell. Nothing like this had really ever happened where it's a 24 episode season already. That's two more than most network shows get. Most network shows, if they're lucky, get 22. So there's already two on top of that. The real time element was really revolutionary at the time. Every episode, every minute of every episode is supposed to be in chronological order, in sequential order, and that creates some very interesting problems that the writers had to solve along the way, and create some very interesting conflicts for Jack. So I think just the format, especially with this first season, I think you could kind of almost compare it to the first season of Survivor. There just hadn't ever been anything like that, and I think it really took a hold of people in a really special way.
And also, it was a show that was somewhat ahead of its time. When it first was going to air in the fall of 2001,
Yeah.
and it was a show about a counterterrorism unit. Terrorism was hardly the buzzword that it was about to become,
Right.
because it was set in a pre-9/11 world. And while the storyline of season 1 does not really involve the terrorism as we have come to know it, in a post-9/11 world, it was a show that sort of then took on a different meaning, and Jack Bauer was sort of a hero for a very specific time and place in a post-9/11 world.
Yeah, he's sort of a very different Captain America than Captain America, but he sort of fills that sort of same kind of wish fulfillment almost, in a way, of how people were really feeling at that time, and how angry people were and how upset people were. And this was a guy who was going out there and getting to do something about that. And that didn't really take hold until season 2. Season 2, which we'll get to next week, is really a very direct response to 9/11, and it deals with Islamic fundamentalist terrorism and all of that stuff. And it really deals with the worst case scenarios of what that could have been like in a post 9/11 world. But this season is a lot more personal. The stakes are nowhere near as high on a wider scale as it's going to get as we progress through the series. But what was interesting is the very first episode of this series ends with a plane exploding. It ends with this unassuming little naked lesbian Mandy terrorist. I don't know if you remember that character. She's great. And she blows up an airplane and drops off an airplane, and there it is, just blowing up in midair on one of the major networks on television. And I think that was just a couple of weeks after 9/11 had actually happened. And I remember that being a very controversial moment that a lot of people were talking about. And it was ahead of its time in that way, and it really it leans into a lot of the paranoia that people were feeling at the time, and plays with that in interesting ways. So 24 can be very goofy. I don't think that we should gloss over that, but it also has its merit in terms of being kind of a very much a historical artifact.
Yeah, that first episode of 24 aired on November 6th, 2001. So
yeah.
Almost 2 months after 9/11.
Yeah, so very close. And I think that I'm sure had a lot to do with why people kind of needed an outlet like this at the time. And even going back, having just watched that season, there's some stuff that very much doesn't hold up. There's times when Jack is asking Nina at CDU to patch in information to his Palm Pilot, which I don't think is something that you really hear too much on TV anymore. But there's still a lot that really holds up and still speaks to a lot of the fears that we have today. So it's a great season. This season is really, really, really good.
All right, so Josh, I know you wanted to talk about power rankings of each of the seasons. Do you want to give us your place in your overall power rankings of season 1?
Sure. For me, I'm a classic 24 fan. I tend to think that the first 3 are the best. And I think that you could probably go 1, 2, 3 on that. I know that there's a lot of people who like season 5 a lot and like season 4 and would probably put them into that mix, but I kind of look at those first 3 seasons of 24 as sort of a trilogy of sorts. And season 1, I think, is fairly untouchable. I think season 1, before I had rewatched it, I think that I was kind of sort of very much holding on to season 2, having been the first season that I had watched in its entirety. Now that I'm 6 episodes away from being done with season 2, I can tell you pretty confidently season 1's the best. And it's hard to touch that season.
I feel like the first half of season 1 is incredible, and then I kind of feel like it sort of falls off the cliff there in the middle. And I'm sure for a lot of the things that we'll talk about in this episode.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about that is, when they started making 24, they didn't know that they were going to get a full 24 episodes. If I remember correctly, the writers had planned those first 12 episodes pretty hard. They had a really strong idea of where they were going to take Jack. Starting off this day, not real. When the show begins, Jack Bauer's about to go to sleep. He's already been up for a day, and then he gets dragged into
very tiring.
Yeah, very exhausting. He gets dragged into what he very famously calls the worst day of his life. And I think that even as the seasons wear on, that probably holds true. And the writers had a very specific arc that you can see. There isn't really a wasted moment in the Jack Bauer storyline. Other storylines we can talk about, but the Jack storyline is really tight in those first 12 episodes. And then I think that the show was popular, and they were able to get that second 12. And it took a little bit of time to find its footing. But I think in those last 6 hours, it really, once the Drazens of it all starts coming into play, it really does tighten back up. But yes, we'll get there. We definitely will.
We'll get there. So let's talk about the big. Let's not bury the lead here, okay? Because I feel like this was the most controversial part of this season. It comes at the end when Terry Bauer dies at the hands of Nina Myers.
Yes.
And this that I know you're so distraught that you're laughing about this. You have no other response.
Well, I have to say, I thought that you were going to go with the amnesia plot.
No, that was
because that is the lead. Let's be honest.
Okay. What I was going to say is that is not controversial because it's universally hated.
Right. No, the Terry Bauer death was a big deal.
All right, well, let's take this in 2 parts. Let's talk about her death. Did you feel like the show needed to kill off Terry Bauer?
I think that it definitely there's like 2 parallel universes. The one we live in is the universe where Terry Bauer died, and we got the 24 that we got after that. And then I'd be very curious to see what 24 looks like with Terry Bauer still in the picture, because as the show grows on, it very much becomes a story about, can Jack forgive himself? Can he redeem himself? Can he find a new life after he's really, achieved the greatest failure of his life up until that point? So I think what I would say is 24 as it exists now is impossible without killing Terry. Whether or not that was the right choice, who knows? Maybe there's a season where Terry Bauer loses her memories again, and it's a really good story, but I kind of doubt that.
Yeah, that bummed me out that they killed off Terry Bauer. I felt
it was a sad moment for sure.
Yeah, it's like no, really, they're gonna kill her.
But I think the other piece of that too is they needed to do that to really, and this is I think the other big story that comes out at the end of the season is that Jack has been betrayed by the person he trusts the most, which is Nina Myers, who's his basically his second in command at CTU, the place he works for. And throughout the whole season, that there's this hunt that's on for a mole. There's a mole inside the agency who's working with terrorists to kill a presidential candidate named David Palmer. And that's always a lingering question throughout the season: is who is this person? Who is this person that is betraying Jack? Is it a character we know? Is it a character that they're going to introduce? They very, very early on kind of make you think that it's Nina, and then they backpedal on that, and you sort of start to focus on other possible suspects. And in the end, it's Nina. It's the one that not only is his closest colleague, it's a friend of his, it's someone that he had a romantic relationship with in the past, and she is revealed to be this completely other person that he had no idea about. And for her to really kind of be sold as this really kind of ultimately in the end of the season, the big bad of the season, I think that it wasn't just enough for her to have betrayed Jack in all of these, many ways that kind of piled up to being this mountain of betrayal. They really needed to put the cherry on top, and I think her killing Terry really, really solidifies that deal.
Did you buy Nina Myers as the mole now that you knew that she was the mole? Like on the rewatch, does it hold up? Is she doing things over the course of the season that say, wait, hold on, if she's the mole, why is she doing X, Y, Z?
There are certain times when it's like, why is she really going that far out of the way to help Jack in this situation? Maybe it behooves her to get Jack killed or at least not help him out of situations as closely as she does. But there are also times when she gives these shifty looks at people that really at the time kind of just seem like maybe she's frustrated with her job, she's tired. She keeps having to look out for Tim and Carrie and for Kim and Terry, and obviously she has these residual feelings for Jack, so maybe she's just flustered about that. But when you watch the season knowing who she is and knowing what she is, seeing those moments, it's kind of chilling. The actress does a really good job. I can't imagine that she knew that she was playing this character, but she was ambiguous enough that when you go back and you watch it and then you know where she's going, it does hold up pretty well. And especially if you know more about the character as the seasons progress, because she becomes a player later on and you kind of get to see Nina without the mask on. And so this really speaks to that character very well.
At what point do you think the writers decided that Nina was going to be the mole?
I think they had to realize that they really only had three candidates. They had Nina, then they have my man Tony Almeida, who's the other big CTU character, rocks a soul patch, drinks beers out of Cubs mugs. He's a really cool guy. And then they had George Mason, who's he's kind of the guy who's above Jack in a different branch of CTU.
I love George Mason. That's my guy, George Mason.
Oh yeah, no, I love George Mason. Season 2 especially, which we'll get to. But George Mason's a great character, and I think that they kind of had to realize that they either were going to have to invent a new character later on and have it be kind of an underwhelming reveal, or they were going to have to give it to one of those three. And Tony had kind of been really pushy with Jack earlier in the season, and George, the first time we meet George Mason, he gets a tranquilizer dart to the leg from Jack Bauer, so he's already kind of in an antagonist role. Whereas Nina, I think Nina, is the gut punch, and I don't know where they figured that out. I'd be really curious to find that out. But I think they must have eventually gotten to the point where they had to make the choice, and it really wasn't a choice to make. It was the no-brainer.
Okay, before we get off of Terry, we have to talk about the amnesia here.
Yes.
One of the most infamous, that and Kim with the Cougar, which we'll talk about next week. Probably the two most infamous storylines in 24 history, and the two examples people point to when they talk about how silly this show can be sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. So what happens is, earlier in the day, Terry and Kim, the mom and daughter combo in the Jack Bauer family tree, they get kidnapped at one point, and then they get freed by Jack, and then they kind of have nothing to do for the next 12 hours. I think that's, another testament to the fact that the writers didn't really know that they were going to have a full season. And so they get assaulted again. They get separated. Terry thinks that she watches her daughter die in a car accident, which turns out to not be true, total misdirect. And the sheer agony and grief that she sees causes her to pass out, wake up about 5 minutes later, and start wandering around with no memories whatsoever. And it's absurd. And there's no defending it. It is very, very, very strange, and it's her storyline for the next, I think, 3 or 4 episodes. And it's bizarre. It's very, very weird, and that's a classic example, probably the classic example of how goofy 24 can be.
Now, how do they get Terry's memory back?
So Terry ends up, she hitchhikes to she gets picked up as a hitchhiker by this very kind woman. They're driving around. She's going to take her to the hospital, and Terry sees this diner on the side of the road and goes, "Oh, I know that diner. I feel like I've been there before." And so she drops her off at the diner, and Terry's waiting there, and the owner of the restaurant recognizes Terry, says that she used to come here a lot with this guy. This guy shows up, and it turns out this is some doctor that Terry was dating when Jack and Terry were separated, because Jack and Terry were going through a rough patch in their marriage before the season starts. So this doctor is kind of all sheepish and wounded, and feels like, well, sweet, now I might have a chance with Amnesia Terry. This might be really good for me.
Yeah.
And so the two of them, they go back to Jack's house, to Jack and Terry's home. They're waiting around to see if maybe there's anything that she remembers. But unknown to Terry this whole time, she has been tracked by one of the terrorists who has been keeping an eye on her. And so this terrorist comes in, shoots the doctor boyfriend, shoots Terry's boyfriend, almost shoots Terry, and then in the 11th hour, I think it's the 7 o'clock hour, comes Tony Almeida, who shoots the terrorist, and the trauma of that situation wakes Terry back up, and she magically gains all of her memories back.
Whoa, that was close.
It was close. It was close.
Close.
Listen, Terry had a rough day. The last day of Terry's life is a hard day.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a very tough day overall for Terry Bauer. If anything, she was in a better place now because she, boy,
I think so.
So much trauma.
I think that ultimately this is a good thing for Terry Bauer.
All right, let's talk about Kim Bauer and her day. And she ends up, Kim Bauer is really her own worst enemy throughout the course of the history of 24.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, she's a problem child.
She's looking for some fun, looking for trouble wherever she can find it.
Yeah, that Los Angeles high school lifestyle, that's something I'm not used to, but I guess you go out, you sneak out of your house, you go find some rough kids and party with them with a six-pack at an abandoned antique store, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, these guys are hired kidnappers, and you're on the run for the rest of the night. So that's how Kim's story starts. She revolts against her parents. She runs away from home. Jack is now forced to deal with finding out who is responsible for trying to kill this presidential candidate, and also trying to find out where his daughter is. And his daughter gets kidnapped. And it's just the first of many bad things that happen to Kim, not just that day, but throughout 24.
The old North Hollywood party scene never fails to disappoint for Kim Bauer.
I guess.
Yeah. So now the big subplot that starts off the show is that we have the presidential candidate, the senator from what state is David Palmer from? Do we know?
I'm not sure what state he's from, but it's the day of the California presidential primary, so he's in California to win that primary.
Yeah, and he is going to be the first African-American presidential candidate, and in some ways, this is sort of a precursor to the rise of Barack Obama, a senator from Illinois.
Once again, 24, ahead of its time.
Now, was it weird at all to go back and watch the campaign run of David Palmer and to know that what year is it supposed to be that David Palmer is running for president? Because I think there was an election in 2000 and then another one in 2004. Is it supposed to be 2000? The
timeline of 24 is a little wonky. I would guess that it's probably about 2000. I think that you could probably safely start it right around there. As the seasons progress, it becomes pretty hard to keep track of time, but I think that's a good start.
Oh, by the final season of 24, it's like the year 2030.
Yeah, 16 years have passed at least.
They're way out in front, and luckily we gave them a couple of, if they do 24 Live Another Day the day after, they'll only be 5 years ahead of us then.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that realistically probably you could add it up. I'm sure we will by the end of all of this. I think it's 15 years pass over the course of 24.
Yeah. Okay.
At least.
Over 9 seasons.
Yes.
Right. Is that how many seasons there are? 9 or 8?
8. This will be the 9th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, talk about David Palmer and his. Do we know anything about David Palmer's platform?
No, I don't think you know too much. I think that you're supposed to kind of just assume that he's a really, really good, honorable, noble guy, and he's kind of he represent. There's a lot of that sort of running on the hope platform. It seems like. Yeah. I think that there's. You don't get too much about his personal life. You find out that he played basketball at Georgetown. He's been with Sherry
like Obama.
Palmer. Yeah, I know. he's been with Sherry Palmer for years, and he's just a good old-fashioned family man. But in much the same way as most of these characters, he can kind of be his own worst enemy, where he wants to really be honest and truthful, unlike most politicians. Basically, at any even at the worst personal cost, and that comes out because his you find out that his daughter, years before the season begins, had been raped, and her rapist died hours later under what appeared to be a suicide. But as the day unravels, you start to find out that maybe his son had something to do with it. It's not that he killed the guy or anything, but he showed up and was part of a struggle that led to this guy's death. And there's this big cover-up. And, of course, on the day that Palmer finds out that he's being targeted for assassination, he's also being targeted for political assassination because this news is about to break. And he wants to get ahead of the story, even though everybody in his inner circle is advising him not to do it. It's political suicide. We can bury the story. And that's not how Palmer rolls. And so that's his sort of secondary thrust of the day, other than, trying not to get killed.
I feel like Barack Obama owes a big debt of gratitude to David Palmer, because in my mind, David Palmer was this country's first African-American president. And I think that David Palmer cleared the way, and a lot of people were like, boy, here's Obama. This guy is like the real-life David Palmer. I want to vote for this guy.
I would be lying if I said that I didn't feel very similarly.
It sounds crazy, but it's true.
I think it's true. I think it's true. I think for people who, especially people who were longtime, pretty old school 24 viewers before Barack really blew up on the scene, I think that this was a similar thing that a lot of people felt. And I think it's honestly a testament to the fact that Dennis Haysbert, as that character, he's maybe not part of the show or anything anymore, but he's in, I would say, almost as iconic as Jack Bauer is David Palmer. I mean, I know that there have been several times where I have considered switching to Allstate purely because David Palmer endorses Allstate.
Yeah, but that's why they use him, because
exactly.
He seems like, boy, that guy, that I'm buying whatever he's selling.
Yeah, if Allstate is in David Palmer's hands, you're in good hands.
Yeah, I'm telling you, he's great, David Palmer.
He might be the best president we've ever had.
But was he a one-termer in 24?
That's a spoiler, Rob. We're not going to.
We're not going to get there. I think he only did one term. All right, so let's talk about the Kim Bauer stuff, and sort of like take us through real quick. Give us the broad strokes of Kim Bauer's day.
Okay, so we already covered. She gets kidnapped, and we find out that she's being kidnapped because the people who are targeting David Palmer also have interest in Jack Bauer. So that's why this season is really personal. It's not about a nuclear bomb. It's not about some sort of viral outbreak. It's not about, whatever crazy Sharknado plot twist is going to happen on 24 Live Another Day. It's all about these people want to take out Palmer and Bauer in one shot. And so Kim is a pawn to get Jack into a position to assassinate Palmer. So while the bad guys are trying to manipulate Jack through his family, Kim is stuck, with this kind of dopey thug boyfriend that she sort of starts developing a crush on, even though he's her kidnapper. His name's Rick. I don't know if you remember Rick. Rick is a real dope. And so she's stuck in captivity for the better part of the first, I think, 13 hours. And then after that, she's getting some medical treatment, and then after that, she gets kidnapped again. And after that, she gets kidnapped again. So she gets kidnapped, I think, at least 3 times in season 1 of 24. And that doesn't even count all of, the mini kidnappings that happen in the first 12 hours. So there's a lot of kidnapping happening in Kim's day.
Can you keep a running count of the number of times Kim Bauer gets kidnapped over the course of 24?
I can go back and get a count for you. I can get an official count. Not right now, but I can do it.
I'd say the over-under is at least 8.
It's over 8. It's definitely over 8.
Yeah, she does get kidnapped a lot. At some point, they only keep her in the show, to get kidnapped. Yeah.
I'm really excited to talk about Kim's day 2 next week, because as bad as it is today, oh wow,
a whole lot worse.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the villains of this season. So about at what point does Dennis Hopper show up? And
He
did you like
he's
the
the
addition of Dennis Hopper?
he's the later game reveal. So I'll try and take it in chronological order because I think that makes the most sense. So it starts off. You think that it's kind of just this sort of gritty, gruff dude named Gaines who does a lot of talking on Bluetooth. Barks orders from a computer monitor. He's kind of like I would listen to the Gaines podcast. He's kind of like the evil Rob Cesternino.
Oh.
He's doing his thing from behind a computer and doing a lot of talking. Doesn't he doesn't show himself until to be kind of like the manipulated character until the Drazens come into play. And the Drazens are these I think that they're from Serbia, I think. I could be wrong on that, but
Was it a real place or was it a sort of like a made up like Czech Republic?
I think this time they use a real place.
Okay.
I know they do fictionalize a lot of countries. Day 2 is a fictional country.
Is it Chechnya?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It turns out that this guy is working for the Drazen brothers, who are these people that were involved in this, dictatorial country. They were these really ruthless leaders, and their father and their sister and a few other family members were killed during a mission that was conducted by Bauer and sanctioned by Palmer when Palmer was in charge of a military committee as a senator.
Kosovo.
Right, Kosovo, that's it. And it's Operation Nightfall, that I remember. And so they're trying to get revenge for Operation Nightfall, and that's why they want to pit Bauer against Palmer and kill the two of them. But the real shoe that drops towards the end of the day is that Victor Drazen, the father, who they thought had been assassinated, is not only not assassinated, he's alive, but he's Dennis Hopper.
Yeah.
And he's like this, high-class prisoner who's being transported from prison to prison. And on the day that the Drazens are going to kill Jack and Palmer is also the day that they're going to free their father from captivity. And Dennis Hopper, the late great Dennis Hopper, is Victor Drazen. He has a fantastic accent.
I remember being really pumped up when they revealed Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, it was good. It was cool. It was cool to have him. I think they revealed him right around the same time that Lou Diamond Phillips is on the show for a minute. It's that like kind of stretch at 24 had some cool faces on there.
Yeah, it's like the home stretch. Like we're coming out of like the amnesia stuff, right? It felt like the show was starting to get back on the right track.
Yeah, definitely. That was, I think, the final 4 or 6 hours of the show are really, really tight.
Yeah. So, what about David Palmer's wife? She plays a big part in this storyline today.
Yeah, she's she's kind of a villain in her own right. She's sort of the Lady Macbeth of 24 for a while. It's interesting though when you go back and you watch it. I had almost forgotten how they presented Sherry Palmer. They present her as this very loving, supportive wife to David. They seem to have a really good marriage, a really good relationship. And then as Palmer realizes that there's been this cover-up involving, his son possibly being involved in the death of his daughter's attacker, it becomes known that Sherry kept this secret. And at first you think it's kind of just like, well, she was just, protecting the kids. But then you start to realize, well, Sherry's got a lot of secrets. And Sherry, is really, she plays, hardball. She plays dirty. And she is a mean lady. She is no good. She's a great character and is very fun to watch, even though she's very improbable a lot of the time. But she is an intense character and really the kind of the chief antagonist in David Palmer's day.
Yeah, I'm looking at her on IMDb, and I remember her. She's in a lot of things. Sherry Palmer, who's Penny Johnson. She was in Deep Space Nine. Is she Cisco's girlfriend or wife?
I don't know. It's been way too long since I've seen Deep Space Nine.
Yeah. She also was in the Larry Sanders Show for a bit as well. So, but
I think she's another one of those people that, like, you see even today, 10 years later, more than 10 years later, if you saw Penny Johnson on the street, you wouldn't think, oh, there's Penny Johnson. You'd think, oh shit, there's Sherry Palmer. You'd probably run the other way.
Yeah. And so, do Sherry Palmer and David Palmer, are they split up by the end of this day, or does that come later?
Yeah, because Sherry makes a power move to kind of win David back to her side, and the power move is she sends one of David Palmer's secretaries in to start sleeping with David Palmer, to start flirting with David Palmer, to begin a behind closed doors relationship, so that he could be satisfied in that way, and so that Sherry can still be in the inner circle and have a little bit of distance. And it's a very weird plan, and David Palmer figures it out pretty quickly. And at the very end of the day, he sits her down and says, I am really, 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 really pumped to become the president of the United States, and I'm equally pumped that you're not going to be the first lady because we're getting a divorce."
The burn.
And she does not take it well, and we get to see a little bit of the fallout of that in the following season.
Yeah. So Sherry Palmer, I don't remember that. I feel like that would have been burned in my memory, and I don't really remember how that went down. Could you take me through the logic of how does that make? Okay, Sherry Palmer says David Palmer can hook up with one of his secretaries. How does that give her more power? Because then she has a secret to blackmail him.
Well, no, it's not even that. You get the feeling that Sherry, it kind of becomes apparent that Sherry doesn't really care about David Palmer as a human being, and kind of really only cares about the political standing and getting into the White House, and she's as tenacious in her desire to be in the White House as David is, except her desires are obviously a little darker than his. And her secret is kind of out, where David has sort of seen her true face and has realized that she's not the person that he married all those years ago. And so I think her thinking is, well, I'm not going to get him to love me anymore, but we can still have a really good political marriage. And if he's getting laid, maybe he's going to be easier to deal with. So I think it's really that simple, is that he just needs to be, taken care of in that department. She can't do that, and that'll soften the blow a little bit. And it'll also give her a spy in the form of Palmer's secretary / mistress.
Yeah. Now, in this first season, so we start to see a little bit of the torture that would basically be one of the trademarks of 24. Do you have any notable torture instances from season 1 of 24?
Yeah, there's definitely a bunch. Though, again, we will really, really start diving into that in a huge way as soon as next week. The leap is really big. But there's a very notable early torture scene, which is Jack has found out that his wife and his kid have been kidnapped, and he's trying to find out where they're being held, and he only has one lead, and it's very thin, and it's this money man whose name is Ted Koffel. And Ted Koffel just seems to be like this average Joe American, really smart guy, really successful businessman, except he has some sort of dealings with a bank account that's associated with gains, I think. And so Jack seeks him out. He knocks out Ted Koffel's driver. He takes the driver's place, and he drives Ted Koffel out into the middle of nowhere and tries the peaceful interrogation at first. Clearly that's not going to work. This guy is sticking to his story. And then after roughing him up a little bit, Jack dampens a towel in the back of the limousine and threatens to shove it down this guy's mouth and just keep it down there until this guy starts digesting the towel. And when he starts digesting the towel, he's going to rip the towel out and pull his entire stomach lining out with it.
Yeah,
so it's more of a it's a verbal threat. It's not something he does, but that's the most extreme thing he does in the day, I think.
I remember that.
That episode is tremendously good. Another good thing about this season, if for whatever reason you're listening to this right now and you haven't watched 24 yet, or you're not sure that you're going to do it, you could go and watch certain episodes of 24 and just really get a feel of kind of the pulp and kind of the style of the show. And that episode, I think that's got to be 9 to 10 a.m. That's a really good one to start at. That would be a really fun one to start watching on. That episode is fantastic.
Could we talk more about Tony Almeida? And one
You don't have to ask. I will happily talk more about Tony Almeida.
now, and Tony Almeida, was he also sleeping with Nina Myers?
Yes, Tony Almeida
Yeah,
is.
Nina Myers gets around.
Yeah, he's getting Jack's leftovers. He's kind of you get the sense that he and Nina are just starting out. They've just started dating. On top of that, Nina is Tony's boss. So Tony is working for his girlfriend, which creates an awkward dynamic.
Oh, he has no problem
and,
with that. Tony Almeida is all about the inter-office romance.
Yeah, he really is. That's sort of his thing. We'll get to there for sure. But he loves sleeping where he works.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very big reason why when the show begins, Tony and Jack are not good buddies. They're not the friends that they're going to become eventually. They're very much at odds, and I think Nina plays a big role in that because Tony is jealous that he thinks Nina still has feelings for Jack. And as far as the viewer is concerned, that's a pretty plausible theory. But of course, we just find out that Nina's just sleeping with whoever can give her the best information.
Yeah. Tony Almeida is the real Jim Halpert of CTU.
Not as many pranks.
Yeah.
Fewer pranks. Does that make Chloe the Dwight?
We'd have to figure it all out. We'd have to sort of go thing by thing. But the problem is, I would say maybe Edgar would be the Dwight of CTU.
Oh, wow. Maybe.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll get there.
So, Tony Almeida, he ends up being a real fan favorite for a while, and then yada yada yada.
Well, when we get there, I'm gonna have some defenses for my boy, but I will say that he starts the show on shaky ground. He kind of seems like sort of a butthead of a character, and as the day progresses, you start to appreciate the soul patch more. You start to appreciate the Cubs mug, and certainly as those first few seasons wear on, Tony Almeida, I think you consider him kind of a top 3 24 character.
Okay, now. One of the other things I've noticed on 24 is I find that a lot of the characters are named after streets in Los Angeles.
Oh, well, that's news to me.
Yeah. Well, I've never heard this confirmed. I just feel like driving around, I feel like I've seen like a street sign like Alameda, and I say, oh, that's weird. Like, so as that comes up, I'll see if I can track more of them. And one of the other things that you're tracking this season that I really love is who's eating during the 24 season.
Yes, there's not a ton of eating in season 1. That was always something that people who hadn't watched the show, I remember when I was watching the show and I was trying to get all my friends. I think I was like 17 or 18 when the show started, and I was trying to get all my friends to be like, come on, this show is awesome, you should be watching this with me. And they couldn't get behind the concept. They're like, when does he sleep? When does he eat? And there aren't really good answers to those questions. But Jack does eat a little bit. The first time you see him, the very first scene, it's just past midnight. He's finishing his day before the day begins. He's trying to negotiate a truce between Terry and Kim, and he's doing it while eating a snack pack. Him and Carl Grimes from The Walking Dead have something in common there. They both like pudding.
Yeah, who doesn't?
So Jack gets a pudding. He gets a sandwich later in the day. The Drazens get a nice feast towards the end of the day. So there's some eating on this season. This is one of the few seasons where you get to see some good quality eating.
Well, that's good. And you really can't run around and do all these things on a full stomach. So
yeah, you gotta eat. It's hard to do all of this head snapping and towel stomach ripping without eating some food.
And I always figure that Jack is either eating or going to the bathroom when we're seeing other people.
Yeah, it's certainly possible.
It's not like he's on the screen at all times where we're getting the quad cam, which was also something new for 24, where you could see somebody doing one thing at one time and somebody else doing something else at the same exact time. So that was another thing that 24 was an innovator of.
Yeah, the split screen. Split screen's great.
Yeah. Also in 24, a lot of things always tend to happen at the top of the hour. It's like a big moment. Nobody ever seems to die at 7:30.
Right.
People
yeah.
Always,
or like 6:43.
Yeah. Anything big that's going to happen in the world happens at like 59 and 30 seconds after the hour.
Yeah, it's very convenient in that regard. I think it's fairly rare for a main character, or even not even a main character, but like a secondary character to bite the bullet at a weird hour. I think there's one example in this season is this guy who goes around in the beginning of the series with Terry looking for Kim and Kim's friend. This guy, he says his name is Alan York, and he's, Kim's friend's father, and it turns out that he's a terrorist and he's working for the Drazens, and later on in the day he gets his comeuppance, he gets killed, and I think that is at like 1:30 or 2:30. So there you go. That's like your one instance. But otherwise, all the big stuff happens at the top of the hour.
Okay. So towards the end of season 1, do we get any sort of setup for season 2 other than Nina Myers is dead?
That Terry is dead?
I'm sorry, Terry is dead.
No, that's really the big setup. I mean, I guess you get the sense that Palmer's going to win the election. It seems pretty clear because he ends up telling the truth about his kids and what happened there, and he doesn't even spin it in such a way. He explains it in a way where everybody is kind of like, oh well, who cares? Big whoop, you're still awesome, and we still want to vote for you. And it becomes very clear that this one thing that could have been a blight on his presidency is out the window, and he's good to go. So you get the sense that he will be back, he will be president, and then when Terry dies, you probably get the idea that next time we see Jack, he's going to be in a pretty low state. He's going to be in a bad way, and that is absolutely the case when season 2 starts.
Yeah. Who would you rather, Nina Myers or Terry Bauer?
I mean, I gotta say Terry Bauer because she won't kill me,
yeah,
or betray me. But
I never liked Terry Bauer's haircut. I want to say
Nina Myers.
Yeah, Nina Myers, I didn't think was that fine either. I felt like Jack Bauer had questionable taste in women, especially in the early going here.
Jack Bauer's taste in women is very interesting. That's something that we will be able to chart as the show goes on.
Yeah, and the one thing that I did like that came out of this. I shouldn't say the one thing, but one of the things I liked, I did like how they set up Nina Myers as like a personal Lex Luthor for Jack Bauer. I liked that, and I was excited every time they brought her back after that.
Yeah, the times that they do bring her back, especially in season 2, she's not there for the whole season or anything like that, but when she is there, it's a great character because you only get shades of that in this final season and in the final episode of the first season, but when you see her again, the mask is off, you know who Nina Myers is now, and it's a very, very, very different character than the person you spent 23 hours with thinking that she's a good guy. And they really commit to Nina Myers kind of being this sort of cockroach who will do anything to preserve her self-interests. And it's really, really great stuff. Season 2 with Nina is very fun.
Yeah. Here's a question from Phil the Issues Guy, or more of a statement. The Nina reveal and Terry's death are the main reasons that make the first season more real and grounded than the rest of the 24 that becomes more action first and expecting the unexpected. Oh, it's like Big Brother. Expect the unexpected.
Well, I think that there's something to that. I think that it was such a shock that the show was not going to have a happy ending, that after all of this, after everything that Jack's done to save his family and to save the president and all of that, and he loses his wife at the end of it and loses his wife to basically his best friend. And I think it was such like a controversial, horrible moment that I do think kind of grounded the show and sort of set the stage that Jack Bauer is a guy who can save everybody but can kind of, doesn't have a shot at saving himself and saving his personal life. But I think that when they went there at the end of season 1, I see where he's coming from, that, they kind of, how do you get more personal than that without, maybe killing Kim? And then if you kill Kim, what does Jack have to do? So I think kind of by necessity, the writers of the show felt like they sort of had to blow the show up a little bit, and they were never really able to shrink it back down to the scale that the first season is on.
Johnny D. Silvera says on Twitter, Sherry Palmer is a lot like Claire Underwood, but David is not so much the Frank Underwood. I think I was thinking that myself. It's like Sherry Palmer is almost in the wrong show. Like, she should be in House of Cards, and David Palmer is just the nice guy. It's amazing to even imagine how they got together.
President Palmer would not do well on that show, I don't think.
No. Oh, he would be really. Frank Underwood would be running circles around David Palmer.
Yeah, it wouldn't be good.
Yeah. So let's see. Sort of broad strokes. I know you liked the ending.
Of season 1.
Yes, that you felt like that Jack was was very impressive in his killing of all of the Drazens.
Oh yeah, well I love the finales of 24 because usually Jack does something very 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 cool in every final episode of a season, and he goes guns blazing in the final episode of this season. He's convinced by Nina that Kim, who has been kidnapped by the Drazens, Nina tells Jack that Kim has been killed as a means of luring Jack to kind of show himself up at the Drazens' hideout because Kim has actually run away, and the Drazens want to lure Jack out into the open so that they can kill him. And like the Drazens have like 10, 15 people on their side, and Jack Bauer has himself and I think 2 handguns and a van. And with 2 handguns in a van, in the span of, I think, 3 or 4 minutes, he destroys every single one of the people involved with the Drazens. And it's a really cool action scene. It's really intense. Even though the viewer knows that Kim is fine, the way that Kiefer wears that scene is really great. He really convinces you that this is Jack at the end of his rope. It makes you wonder what Jack would have done if there were still Drazens left to be killed after Terry had died. And it's a really badass action scene that I would be lying if I said I don't YouTube that at least once a year.
Whoa!
It's a really cool scene, very cool scene.
Huge.
Yeah.
All right. So in big picture, who were your MVPs of season 1?
I think you gotta go Jack. I think that this is the season. This is the season that really creates an iconic character in Jack Bauer, and I think that it's almost unfair to say Jack Bauer because he's going to be the MVP of basically every season, but especially in season 1, they created a really special, interesting character with this guy. So I think the easy answer I would probably give to Jack, but I think you could also say the same about Palmer. I think that as we've covered pretty well here, that was a really special character as well. And I think that if you're a 24 fan, you can't look at all state commercials the same way as everybody else. So I would pick those 2 as sort of my MVPs.
That's right. Who was the LVP? Who was the least valuable player in season 1?
Kim is always an easy answer. I think I'm gonna go with There's this girl that Kim becomes like frenemies with because she's Rick's girlfriend and she gets all jealous and she's terrible and she's horrible and she just has no right to be on the show. So this random girl whose name I can't even remember is going to be my LVP.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's hard for 24 because they are dealing with so much gravitas of things of people getting killed and national security, and so when they dabble in anything that's not that, it seems so trivial to be even talking about that on the same show.
Yeah, that problem on season 1 is nothing compared to that problem on season 2. That's my takeaway from my current season 2 rewatch. Like I said, I think I have 6 episodes left. It gets really rough at times in season 2. Kim's entire day is a disaster, for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Is there anything about season 1 in particular that you want to highlight before we get ready to move on to season 2 next week?
No, I think the thing I would say is just that I have to imagine it must have been hard to I know a lot of people who watched 24 but started in the middle years and then went back and watched the early seasons, and I know a lot of those people were kind of surprised at how small season 1 is. There's no bomb that's threatening to destroy Los Angeles. There's no nuclear strike that's gonna attack the entire country in one fell swoop. There's no war that's there's no threat of World War III or anything like that. It's really as simple as this is a guy who's trying to find his family and trying not to get this other very important political figure killed, and finding out that the 2 of them have a lot more in common than they realized. and it's really small, and it's very different from anything that 24 ever does. I felt a whole lot of nostalgia rewatching this season, and was really happy with how well it holds up. So I think the takeaway would be savor season 1 of 24. It's unlike the rest of the show. The rest of the show is very fun and has a lot of stuff that's really worth embracing. But I think that
Josh, you cut out there for a second. Can you just say that one more time?
yeah, no, just that I think that first season of 24 is just it's the bomb. You should watch it.
Wait, careful with that. Careful with that.
No, it's not the bomb.
So, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate the Jack Bauer and David Palmer bromance this season?
Oh, well, certainly as far as the rest of the show goes, it's a 10.
Yeah.
You know, I don't
Boom.
think that you see Jack and Palmer in the same room together ever again, except for one time. So you know, this is very key for their bromance, and it's the reason why all of their long distance phone calls are as powerful as they are for the rest of the show.
All right, good stuff. All right, so Josh, next week we will be back on what did we schedule this? Is it Monday?
Yeah, we're gonna do Tuesday next week, I think.
Oh, Tuesday. Okay. So Tuesday of next week, and we'll try to get a regular rotation going on of when this is going to be scheduled. We're also going to be working on setting up a feed in iTunes for these shows. Of course, this is the first 24 live show, so we don't have anything like that set up yet. But as we get closer to 24 Live Another Day, we'll let you know how to never miss an episode of this show. So just in the meantime, subscribe to the YouTube channel at postshowrecaps.com/YouTube. And then, Josh, I feel like we should come up with a good way for people to be able to get their comments about 24 season 2 during the week.
Yeah.
Post
Maybe
it in the comments.
hashtag 24PSR.
Yeah, or just post it in the comments and we'll go back and look at them on.
Yeah, and if
episode.
anyone who wants to tweet my way, I'm happy to talk about the show, and we can hold your season 2 questions for next week.
Okay, so tweet to Josh. He's at Round Howard on Twitter. I'm at Rob Cesternino. And if you have questions, I think the easiest way to do is just post them in the comments on postshowrecaps.com, and we'll be back with more post-show recaps all week.
Hooray!
There you go. By the way, check out our Walking Dead recap. Josh and I broke it all down. Walking Dead season 4, episode 13 last night. That's on postshowrecaps.com as well.
And only 3 more episodes left.
Oh my God.
We're getting close.
We're getting close, and then Game of Thrones Live kicks off.
Oh my God. I'm very excited for that.
So much to do. Scott St. Pierre wants to know, Josh, are you in Calgary to interview Kim Bauer in her hometown for post-show recaps?
Oh, I cannot confirm or deny that that's why I'm currently in Calgary, but yes.
Are you, because Kim Bauer has been through enough. If you are there to kidnap Kim Bauer, I suggest you tread lightly, my friend.
I don't think that I would want to piss off Jack Bauer, so I'm probably staying clear of that for that reason at least.
All right, that's great. Anyway, we want to know what you guys think. Let us know your thoughts on 24 Season 1, the things that you remember, the things that we missed. Let us know in the comments, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care, everybody.